Good morning again. This is take 2 of my video. I'm going to be talking about how to make the most of the presentation part A, part of the production log. I've called this short talk Maximizing the Production Log. Just want to remind you that the examiner reads the production log really carefully. It's your opportunity to show all of your thinking and your planning and your telling of the backstory. So please make sure that you write in a very detailed manner. Now, when you look on your project queue, you'll see it begins with box A, which is called Plan Format of my presentation, okay? And in this, you want to talk about the fact in our particular context that we do a formal EPQ presentation evening. So you might want to put 2 or 3 lines of explanation about how we have students from other year groups coming, we have teachers, we have parents, that it is quite a big deal, because I think that's part of the assessment, that you're talking about the fact that this is actually a public presentation, okay? I would also talk about what the room is like. Some of you are going to set up the room, so you want to talk about things like the visuals, how you've moved the furniture, how you've planned the presentation carefully. And I'm going to show you an example of that in a minute. I would also talk about your engagement techniques. Many of you have decided to use things like quizzes or Kahoots or card activities. If you have an artifact like Lily Rose over there, then you want to have that very central. You may want your audience to interact with the artifact. Think really carefully about that. Some of you may get friends to hand things out. All of this can go into the project queue. And don't forget, when we've finished, if necessary, you can load up photographs. Some of you before have seen the girl whose name I forget, who set up the whole room with crime tape, etc., made it into a crime scene, and the audience enjoyed that very much, okay? So also discuss your use of film, your use of visuals. Some of you are going to be making your own films, editing them. I know some of you are doing things like time lapses. But also talk about slide design. And I put there text light. Remember, I do not want large amounts of text on the slides. We want you to use the slides as a visual aid. And the bullet points should merely be an aide-memoire. They should not be the whole speech. They should just prompt you into remembering what it is that you're actually going to say. So if you're using audience activities, mention them. You could even have pictures of things and say why you're doing that. If you're going to use handouts, because you've got a very complicated project, that requires visualization or diagrams, then talk about that. And also discuss the timing. We've got 20 minutes maximum for speaking. That would leave at no more than, say, 8, possibly 10 minutes of questions and answers. I'm going to say a lot more about the Q&A because that's an important part of the presentation. Here's an example of a girl last year, Zara, who did a Shakespeare monologue. I'm not going to read all of this out, but I'm just going to show you some of the things that she put down. She talked about, using technical language and simplifying things. A major part of the presentation, as we know, is adjusting your audience and your purpose. Your audience for the report is expert, so it will have high degrees of technical language and lexical density. This case, you're going to be more like Bill Nye the Science Guy, aren't you? You're going to make everything digestible, you're going to take the technical detail out, and you're going to aim at the general public, at a lay audience. Why I use Zara's one is she set up her room beautifully. She said, I want the audience to be fully immersed in the world of Shakespeare, so I will utilize props. She had Yorick's skull. Some of you will know from Hamlet that he speaks to a skull. She had goblets. She had a model of the Globe Theatre, and she had a copy of Hamlet. So she set the room up so that it was saturated in the period. And I think that that's a really interesting one. She also talked about her use of, she was a very accomplished public speaker. She used an iPad clicker, and she also discussed nerves. She preferred having cue cards. Some of you will want to have no cue cards at all. You may prefer delivering it. The advantage of not having cue cards is that you have eye contact with your audience, don't you? Here is an example of another beautiful artifact project. In this case, this girl was writing about Lebanon. Her artifact is here in front of us. She did a triptych collage of what Lebanon was like in the 60s when it was the Riviera of the Middle East, then the Civil War breaking up, and then finally the present day. This installation here shows inflation in Lebanon. So you can see how interesting it is to do a presentation with your artifact in the middle. Even if you haven't done an artifact, you can still use visual props if you so wish. The first academic conference I ever presented at, I did poster presentations where I spoke to a poster and looked at different graphics and bits of text. Remember, there's nothing that makes you have to do a PowerPoint. PowerPoint is usually what most people choose, but you don't necessarily need a PowerPoint, particularly if you're an artifact person. You could just use the artifact if you so wish. Now, in box B of the production log, you might want to open up on Project Q as I speak. This is the one that says overview of my presentation. Now, as I said to Kitty a moment ago, you can either put the slides into your appendices, but they have to be there together with the speech, or you could paste the slides into this box B. Even if you do paste the slides in, you still need to describe them and to discuss them and to show the rationale and the thinking behind it. Remember that Project Q is there to convince the examiner that you're thinking about things very carefully and to give them the backstory that they'll need to understand the complexity of your project. I would discuss things like engagement as the key thing, the hook that you're going to use. What's your narrative arc? What do I mean by that? What's your through line, your story? Because anything, any piece of writing or any speech needs coherence. It needs to move step by step. So make sure that you have some kind of agenda or structure that guides your audience through the talk, and you discuss that in Project Q. That's why I talk about transitions and coherence. Good speaking also has next I will turn to. That sums up this section, now I will be looking at, and that kind of signposting makes your talk much more comprehensible and engaging to your audience. Use the full spectrum of the mark scheme, as I say here. We've discussed that, and I'll come back to that in my take-home message in a minute. Make references to the mark scheme in Project Q. Say, in order to boost my grade in decision-making and creativity and criticality, I did this because, and you explain why. And don't forget, discuss AO1 always, which is the kind of project planning, the order, etc. Finally, make sure that you have a kind of take-home message for your audience. Every piece of writing, every speech needs a sense of purpose. Here's a good example of a student. I've just clipped one of the paragraphs. My presentation is structured into 3 key sections: the research process, the planning, my primary findings, and a reflection of the overall EPQ journey. You feel the AO1 immediately, don't you? You feel that this is planned, that it's structured. I've chosen to focus exclusively on core concepts in each section, deliberately omitting certain subtopics. So of course you could also talk about what you're leaving out as well as you're putting in. The general impression you want to give to the examiner is of someone who's thinking very carefully about order, about content, about delivery techniques, and above all, how to make it interesting and how to make it engaging. Now the third box is the modification box. And this is the one that asks you about rehearsals and getting feedback. I've told you, you must see your supervisor, show them the slides. If you have time, you could even deliver the presentation to them. You should deliver it to your friends 2 to 3 times, bore your parents to death, ask them if they'll watch your presentation, okay? Get feedback, and you yourself critically analyze your presentation. Ask yourself the normal questions. Is this impactful? Is the message clear? Am I going to engage the audience? Is it an interesting, creative vision that brings the project alive? Some of the things that you can discuss is the use of cards and notes, changes to the structure of the slides. I think Jo did far too many slides before. That's something that she might want to discuss. I think in a 20-minute speech, we're looking more like 12 slides, 14 at most. Time yourself, because it's kind of irritating if someone's flicking through multiple slides. Each slide should actually be there for a reason, have a real function. So discuss your improvements, your insertions, things you put in, things you omit and took out. Of course, our favorite thing is to discuss coping with nerves, isn't it? And how you're going to know the speech very well. What techniques will you use to center yourself, to make yourself feel confident? You could discuss the role of memorization, what I call choreography. Choreography, how you will move about the space. Will you get friends to help you? At what point are you going to use an activity or a film or a piece of music, etc.? You can discuss things like your rehearsal strategies. Are you someone who likes committing things to memory, or are you someone who's going to use cue cards? If you're going to use cue cards, how many points on them? How will you use them? Go into real depth. Don't forget to practice some Q&A. I would do this with a friend. Get them to fire some questions at you. Discuss, as I say, this with your supervisor and with me if you get the chance. And very, very important that you think about changes in light of feedback. I did this because I received this feedback. I thought this would be improvement because. Go into as much detail as possible because you will be using the mark scheme. Here's a student's one that I just want to point a couple of things out. In my meeting prior to creating my presentation, my supervisor reviewed my plan and recommended more that I focus on the EPQ journey. Okay, so there's one example. After creating my presentation, doing a trial run, she advised me. Always use the language of advice, not the language of instruction. Don't say that my supervisor told me to do this. You know, she advised me, and then I did this. This was my decision. I initially used animation of text, and then she discusses how she changes that. I only used animations on 3 slides, and she discusses why. By doing practice at rehearsals, the common feedback that I was talking too fast, probably like I'm jabbering on this video now. Think very carefully about your delivery. Remember, delivery is an important part of it. Pauses, clarity, signposting, audience engagement, eye contact, good open body language so that you look strong and composed, yeah? I've been rehearsing using the iPad clicker, and she goes into some of the technology there before talking about how she's going to use her 3D model of the globe. So that's a genuine piece where she is actually addressing that question. So in conclusion, to finish up now, here's the mark scheme, remember it. I told you that you should hit every single one of those criteria. You don't have to do them in equal measure. I would put a lot of emphasis on AO3, which is the develop and realize bit, where you're talking about the problem solving, the criticalness, the creativeness, the changes, etc. Also, though, do say a little bit about yourself, what you've learned about your learning, looking back at the project, etc., which is the AO4. Remember to bring the evidence out. So someone like Lily Rose, who did the artifact, I know that she put a hell of a lot of effort behind the scenes, and when you look at the artifact, you may not realize that. So the presentation is your opportunity to tell the story of your project, to get people interested, but also to see the fine-grained work that is behind the scenes. Engagement is the key. So you might want to think about things like film, editing your own film, which a lot of students do here, time lapses, especially on artifacts, what photos and visuals you're using. Are you going to use infographics or process charts? Some people like to use costumes, music, etc. And particularly if you're an artifact person, it's an opportunity for audience feedback. So you can use polling and things like that to see if the audience are impressed by your artifact. And above all, remember that Q&A is really important. Answer the questions in detail in the presentation, okay? And in your project queue, to show that you've prepared, do some practice. So I wish you really good luck on your presentation. Put a lot of effort into Project Q as well. Thank you.